Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's third in a series of webinars on building a resilient enterprise, mastering supply chain maturity, and risk management. Moving from stage two, and in stage two, we're talking about the optimistic silos, to stage three, define repeatable operations. So making that transition. We appreciate you taking the time today to join us in building and evolving resilient enterprise, and we welcome your comments and suggestions at any time during the webinar. And we hope that your family are healthy and safe. As many of you know, we have a webinar series. Our first webinar was on the overall supply chain management readiness assessment and alignment to Gartner's 5-stage maturity model. Our second webinar took a deep dive into looking at moving from stage one to stage two. And today we're going to focus on going from stage 2 to 3. And then keep your calendars open on March 27th for moving from stage 3 to 4. And on April 17th, moving from stage 4 to 5. And then we're going to wrap it all up at looking at how do we optimize our overall ecosystem. Again, thanks again for joining us today. With us today, we have Greg Schlegel. Greg has been around for quite a while. He's been the head of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium, and he's also written a book on supply chain risk management in emerging discipline, 2015, published in 2015. And he's the former president of ASCM. My background is I focus on Lean Six Sigma. I've done a lot of work in supply chain and supply chain risk management. And I'm a Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt, as well as a supply chain transformation executive and architect. With that, we're going to look at the deliverables today. Today's deliverables are insights to build a resilient enterprise. Again, we're going to focus on that stage 2, the optimistic silos that a lot of us may be in. And then we look into overcoming the barriers to increase operational stability. And then what is that roadmap to stability through the 5 stages of the Gartner model? And then we'll look at some success stories. To move from stage 2 to 3, we have a very detailed success story for you. And then what are the financial payoffs? How do you sell going through this process to your management that it's important to become more mature? With that, Greg?
You bet. Thanks a lot, Jim. Pleasure to be with you all today to chat about this important topic for all of us. So we thought we'd give you a thumbnail sketch of who we are and what we do at the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. We are 33 companies at the moment. We're about 1,700 professionals around the globe. We operate in 23 countries at the moment. On the right-hand side, we've got 3 basic pillars. We do a lot of education. That's where we grew up way back when. We've been in the business for about 15 years. So we still do a lot of education, both online and face-to-face. We have a host of consulting organizations who essentially can lead, guide, direct, and coach you on your supply chain risk and resiliency journey. And then on the right side, we have software as a service, cloud-based software companies who essentially can do the heavy lifting, especially if you want to do things like increase your visibility throughout your global supply chain, map that supply chain, use predictive analytics, and so forth. So education, consulting, and software. On the left, we have 5 areas of products and services. We have 2 online certificate courses, self-paced, on a learning management system. You get in there, there's 3 levels on each. One is geared towards manufacturing folks. The other is geared toward public health care and logisticians. You get a certificate at the end of the course, and there are 3 levels. We do a lot of coaching and consulting, where we lead, guide, direct, and coach companies on their journey. We mentioned we have a host of platform solutions that support our vision from our book. And then we have 2 online assessments. One is the online supply chain readiness assessment. We're going to talk about that today. That evaluates your process maturity within your supply chain and inherent risk. And the other is a pure risk 90-day action plan. It identifies through a host of questions where are you on our 5-stage risk maturity? What is your company's risk appetite? And then what is your company's operating culture? And with those 3 answers, we tend to provide a client action plan using some AL, ML algorithms. So that's pretty much who we are and what we do. Back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. Okay. Not sure, my video is not working, so I'll just keep going. Enhanced International Group is an exchange of passionate experts to guide your transformation. We have over 70 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers focusing on enabling your enterprise. We lead through thought leadership while democratizing technology. EIG acts as a master integrator between our 70 partners to provide you the best solution for your challenges. Reviewing the ecosystem, we link strategy and execution. And in summary, for this particular webinar, that ecosystem results in a positive momentum for your company, its employees, stakeholders, stockholders, suppliers. And today we'll explore how increasing supply chain maturity enhances your leaders' ability to make more proactive, informed decisions that have a positive impact to your company's financials. With that, we'll move to the agenda. Today, our first item on the agenda is reviewing the Gartner 5-stage maturity model and building a resilient enterprise. Then the second is looking at the 3 dimensions of stable growth, again, moving from stage 2 to 3, as we previously discussed. And then we'll align the supply chain management tiers 2 and 3 to drive stable business growth. And then we'll look at real-world case studies, success stories in scaling supply chain maturity. Greg will share us that story, and then we'll end it with the profitability. How can we turn our supply chain maturity into a revenue and margin driving engine? With that, we'll get started with the Gartner model, a review of this from our last webinar. On the y-axis, we have mindset from on the bottom, from inside out to outside in, and then from what are you targeting on the left side, cost, and on the right side, service. So as we progress through the maturity stages from stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we'll find out that we start with service. We will serve the customer. We'll deliver our goods at any cost. So we're focused on revenue. But of course, this isn't scalable, and it becomes expensive at some point in time with your margins. And then as you move from stage 2 to 3, we're moving from those optimistic silos into that dependable operations of stage 3. And as we're working through there, we're standardizing, and we realize that one size does not fit all. So how do we locally optimize and create a scalable solution in our ecosystem? Then we move into the outcome for outside of stage 3, where we're looking at optimizing the margin. So instead of cutting cost, cutting everything at all costs, here we're looking at margin per SKU, and profitability, and by this time you're regularly segmenting your marketplace and your suppliers. And then at the end of this, we're looking at if you're able to achieve this, which only about 5-10% of the companies are out there are doing that, you'll get to that scalable, value-centric, adaptable, and focused on margin to serve. So you, through the customer, you're actually serving and driving margin, and through your suppliers, you're linking your suppliers and your customers together, and you're that conduit to drive that scalable growth. And of course, companies like Cisco and Apple are at the top of the list of performing at that. So let's take a deep dive into uh, stage two. And the complexion of this is processes are becoming more and more uh, consistent, but we're still fragmented, right? Because in this stage, the silos are sometimes working against each other. The teams start experimenting with structured approaches and technologies. You get some early wins of being in a siloed organization, and you'll get some local optimization. The remediation and the challenges is that these efforts create inefficiencies and misaligned priorities. So you got to rob Peter to pay Paul and get into the whack-a-mole often at this stage. And so you have a difficulty in scaling, and when you try to scale, you end up actually removing key components of the organization that enable other parts of the organization to function. And over the long run, you actually lose. So it's a balance. You want to cut costs, but at the same time, you're have all these trade-offs. So again, the financial outcome here is standardized, but one size does not fit all. It's locally scalable, but it's not adaptable. So that's the key here. It's not adaptable. So moving to stage three, which is a change in culture and priorities and organization structure. So, this transition to standardize, as it says at the top, repeatable processes supported by centralization. So we always hear about you have a bunch of 5, 10, 20 locations, and now you're looking to centralize. And in this type of environment, it's a very hard push because you're trying to get everybody to normalize, but sometimes you have make to stock, make to order, engineer to order types of things in different parts of your company. And so sometimes when you standardize, you actually remove processes that other parts of the organization rely upon in order to serve the customer. So then you start losing customers when you standardize too much from a centralization. So how do you create that balance is the challenge, but really learning, again, the plan, source, make, deliver, return, understanding what is a supply chain, what is your end-to-end streamlining is going to be key to help you move to stage three. So adopting these types of principles and standards are going to enable you to become more effective. So again, the financial outcome here is, again, these end-to-end standards for your end-to-end value stream, that interoperability between your operations and business units, and you're trying to get to that enterprise scalable. But during this, may not have high top line growth, but you may have higher margin growth in this period of time. And it's like clean your house before you go outside to grow. So that's what we often talk about in this stage, moving to here. So this is not the time to be going out and buying other companies. If you do buy another company, keep it separate until you figure out how you are managing this from a centralization perspective. So that's the overview on those two stages, stages 2 and 3. We'd ask you to enter in the chat your thoughts on what stage you would say your plant, division, or company resides in. Stage 1. Again, the basic stage where you're looking at scaling quickly. You might be immature. Stage 2, the optimistic silos. Stage 3, you're getting into centralization. Stage 4, where you're already centralized. You've already created those capabilities, and you're now optimizing on customer value. And stage 5 is where you're looking at your company as an ecosystem where you're able to both balance your customer and your suppliers to drive margin to serve. Greg, your comments?
uh yeah, it could be a little daunting. It might look a little daunting, but it's what we've seen is and we're going to talk about it during this session and prior sessions is how to kind of sneak up on each stage using some of our tools, techniques, and methodologies to help you move from one stage to another based on your culture, Jim mentioned it, and the attitude of the organization. So no right or wrong.
No right or wrong. It's just where you're at and where you're going to go. Mainly where you're going to go. Realize where you're at so you know where to go. With that, I'll turn it over to Greg.
Yeah, very good. We wanted to get you grounded on the Gartner 5-stage maturity model again. What we'll do in this section is we'll touch on the 3 dimensions of stable growth from our point of view. Again, assisting, augmenting, leading, guiding, directing, coaching, and helping you perhaps move from stage 2 to 3. So with that, we'll take a look at our 3 dimensions. First dimension is our 3-dimensional perspective on the resilient enterprise. We use this cube. Let's talk through it. The first dimension is on the front left. That's supply chain process maturity. Why do we start there? Because studies have shown, and we have seen it in our experience, that improved supply chain process maturity equates to financial benefit to the bottom line. And we'll touch more on this tool that you see in a minute. Our second dimension is on the right-hand side. That's supply chain risk and resiliency. Again, why? Our opinion is risk management is no longer a nice to have, folks. In our complex global supply chains, it's a must. All right. So we'll touch on this concept in a minute as well. The third dimension is on the top. We like to advocate the balanced scorecard framework. Why? Because we feel it's a pretty good business set of questions of discovery. Because it takes, as Jim said, it takes an inside out and outside in approach to the company through constant questions of discovery. So the framework is extremely important when a company is at Gartner stage 3, that's our opinion, and it wants to move to the next stage as well. So we wanted to describe the Gartner 5-stage model, and the balanced scorecard will discuss each individual element of the 3 dimensions post haste. Next, first, the genesis of the supply chain management assessment tool. Just want to give you a quick thumbnail sketch of one of our dimensions. The tool's been with us for a while. It was born as a first of a kind, out of a first of a kind MBA supply chain risk management course at Lehigh University. We taught that for 10 years. It was so well received, we kind of took it on the road. We've been leveraging it for about 10 years, more or less. We've utilized it in our classrooms, our workshops, webinars, and with client engagements. We have several versions. We've now upgraded this public version within an LMS learning management system platform. What you see on the left is the chart that you get after answering 92 questions. There's 13 tenets. You can see them around the clock. They are in the blue tenets up top at 12 o'clock are leadership, balance scorecard, and intentional redundancies. Then in the red on the right-hand side, we have the tactical tenets. You can see them. And then on the left are the green, and those are what we call operational tenets. So we got 13 tenets. Blue are strategic, red are tactical, green are operational. What does this chart measure? Measures 2 things. It measures your supply chain process maturity within those 13 tenets, and also inherent risk. So what do you see? What do you get? You see the black line, those are the answers to the questions within each supply chain process. And then how do you read it? How do you measure it? Well, the closer you are to the center of the chart, the more mature that process is and the less inherent risk, and vice versa. The farther away you are from the center, the less mature that process is, and these are best in class processes, the less mature that process is and the more inherent risk you have. And the beautiful part of the tool is we make it free. We put the URL up at the top. This is free. You can find it using the URL at the top or entering our website. So we put that together as a starter. Next, our second dimension is our supply chain risk and resiliency maturity model. All right, go through it real quick. On the left-hand side on the y-axis is supply chain risk and resiliency maturity from low to high. On the x is time, but we call it competitive advantage from 0 to infinity. The 5 stages, real quick. On the bottom left is the foundational. That's what you're doing today. That's education and awareness of what you can leverage in this discipline. Second stage is visibility. What do we mean by that? Improving the visibility in your supply chain, upstream to your suppliers and downstream to your customers. Why do we advocate visibility? Because we know that what you don't know about your supply chain can and will hurt you. Third stage, predictability, not necessarily what you might be thinking of. We call it sense and respond, but it's really, we advocate digitizing your supply chain. Kind of visibility and the predictability, stage 2 and 3 go together. We advocate you digitize your supply chain. Why? So you can run what if scenarios. So you can take a look at how your supply chain will react based on losing a supplier, hypothetically, or losing a customer, or having a problem with a warehouse or a manufacturing facility. What is the financial impact and what is the risk to your organization? Stage 4 is resiliency. That's where you take all the tools, techniques, and solutions, if you will, methodologies, and you start to embed them into your daily supply chain workflows. And then finally, sustainability. I know the box is green, but we're not advocating circular supply chain or waste management. Sustainability to us is as you prove out the methods in 4 stages, you might be doing it as a proof of concept. How do you expand it either to more product lines, a plant, a division, or the enterprise? On the bottom, we like to put a heat map where if you're at the starting point, you probably have some high risk in your supply chain. As you move up the maturity model, you can go from high, medium to low risk. We have a mantra up on the top. We normally tell you identify, assess, mitigate, and manage. That's our mantra. Then we always like to put the rhetorical question, where is your plant, division, or enterprise on this maturity model? And then finally, our third dimension is the balanced scorecard. We'll just give you a quick thumbnail sketch, top down, left to right. The balanced scorecard is great because it's got 4 perspectives, as we said, inside out, outside in, financial, customer, internal, business process, growth, and learning. So the first 2 on the left are financial perspective. How do we look to our shareholders? You know, and there's a host of measures. Then the second one is the customer perspective. How do we look to our customer? What is our customer expectations and how do they feel about us? All right, so that's kind of outside in. 2 more on the bottom right, internal business perspective. What must we do as a team within the organization to excel? And then on the bottom, growth and learning. Can we continue to improve our skills, our capabilities, our delivery, our performance, and create value for our customer? On the right side, it is kind of a cascading effect. You can see that in the box, you can just start at the very high level. It gives you a framework of those four perspectives. Then you can start to drill down and look at areas of risk in terms of where those risks are using our assessment tool, the types of risks, strategic, tactical, and operational, and then build out some KPIs and evaluate them. So that's essentially the three dimensions of a resilient enterprise from our point of view. Our next section is really aligning supply chain management assessment tiers 2 and 3 from our tool set to drive stable growth. And I'll send it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. Appreciate it. And we're back to this Gartner's model that we talked about before, and we're going to overlay what Greg just discussed and shared with us on the supply chain management readiness assessment, as well as the supply chain risk and resiliency maturity model. So the supply chain management assessment talks about that Greg showed in the spider diagram, started in the outside of that spider diagram with the ring of fire, if you recall. Then it was apprentices, and then mainstream and exemplars. So those you can see align pretty well with stages 1 through 3.5, 4, so to speak, of the Gartner model. So when you're an exemplar, you could almost say you're going to be a stage 4 or 5 also. So by overlaying these, it's very interesting and very easy to do by taking our assessment, that supply chain management readiness assessment that's free, as Greg shared with you, that takes about 20-30 minutes. So that free assessment we call tier 1. So we recommend doing that for any organization, just anybody in an organization to get started. Where tier 2 is, again, this is where you get a group of stakeholders across your supply chain, right? Plan, source, make, deliver, return. That's your supply chain. And you get those key stakeholders from finance, from customer service, from the manufacturing, from all areas, logistics. So getting that cross-functional team and having them complete the assessment and then look to see what is the overall score. But more importantly, where do you guys agree and where you don't agree? Because risk is perspective, right? And performance is perspective. So once you're aligned, then we advocate our tier 3 is to say, okay, now your organization or your plant or area that of focus knows what you're doing. Then tier 3 comes up, and then you say, okay, where are we at relative to the industry? How are we performing? Well, that's quite interesting, because then you say, are we best in class, worst in class within our industry? Not just overall from a best in class perspective of the 0 to 10 that Greg showed, but where do you fit within industry, which is what we'll cover in a little bit later today. And then tier 4 is, how do you get over these walls? So especially moving from stage 2 to 3 takes a lot of extra effort. So of course we offer consulting and support in that area. And because to get to that optimize where you're optimizing your supply chain from a margin perspective, and you're moving out of a cost out perspective, there's so much more money on the table that you couldn't even see when you're only looking at costs. So then when you get to stage 3, then we get into the supply chain risk management maturity model that Greg shared, where we start with visibility, predictability, and resiliency and sustainability as we've outlined those on top of this overall maturity model. So we feel like there are some things from a risk management that you could probably do in stage 1 or 2, but it shouldn't be your focus. You need to be cleaning up your own shop, so to speak, first, before you start thinking about really driving these other more complicated activities. So really the question is, are you ready for supply chain risk and resiliency? And what we're saying is, If you're stage 1 and 2, probably not. If you're 2 and 3, you can start thinking about it. And as you're moving from 3 and above, this is where you would go after it. So again, we ask you to ask, where are you today? Where are you tomorrow? With that, I think we're just going to keep moving on this, but something to truly look at in your organization. So again, another way to look at this is, again, this is a spider diagram where the middle of the spider diagram is at 0 at the top of this, and the outer web, you could call it, the ring of fire is 10 at the bottom. And we're providing you that roadmap to move through the Gartner supply chain 5 stages, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And again, using the supply chain management assessment tool, and soon to be supply chain risk management tool that we have today that's available. We'll make that even more available in the future. So the one thing when we're talking about benchmarking, where are you at relative to your contemporaries in your industry? We look at quartiles, percentiles, as it's called from a statistical perspective. So what is a quartile? Quartile divides up all the data collected for that particular industry into 4 parts, from minimum to maximum. So in general, the maximum you would think as are the leaders, right? And the minimum is the laggards. It's kind of flip of our scale, but this is the general layout of it. And the question is, where is your company, in those, in which quartile are you? Are you in the 0 to 10, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, or 75 to 100 percentile? So again, the first quartile is, think of it, if you had 100 competitors in your group, it would be 100 surveys, and the first 25 in sequence from lowest to highest would be from 0 to 25, and so forth. For followers to be the 25 to 50th one, which is your median, you often hear, and then your average followers, or your average performance, is 50 to 75, and the laggards are that lower. So you're moving up from the laggards to the leaders through each of those quartiles. So what does that look like overall for your industry? And we've accumulated, hundreds of assessments over the last 10 years and created these market segment baselines that we'll be sharing with you. So this is exciting. So we look at it. We look at aerospace and electronics, and you can see that here again is the overall best in class, ring of fire to exemplar. And then you see the overall average of all of our data across all enterprises is 4.9. And then you can see that aerospace, interestingly enough, is very narrow, and they seem to be hovering right around here. So you have a few outliers of poor performers, but the majority of them are above the average overall performance. Electronics, not too surprisingly, is a little bit better on the overall average of their particular group. And you can see that they're more spread out, but they're also a lot, they've broken the 3 barrier of exemplars that we see. And then we threw in petrochemicals, not too surprising. They're a little bit fall behind these, behind electronics and aerospace. And heavy industries is kind of neck and neck with petrochemical, which isn't too surprising because they have many of the same types of processes, and you could almost say, are they very similar environments, and therefore behave the same overall from an industry perspective. So again, the question is, where are you in the industry? If you're at the bottom here, then you're probably in trouble. If you're ahead, that means you're an exemplar. You're probably known as an exemplar. So then that helps you understand not just where you are overall in supply chain maturity, but where you are relative to your competitors. with that, just kind of want to review moving from stage 2 to 3 and some of the challenges that you have to overcome. So stage 2 is you're trying to build your silos to build it out, but stage 3 says we want to come together and centralize. So the silo decision making that you created your organization upon now is not a positive thing. It actually limits your collaboration and visibility because everybody's fighting against each other. And there's no standardized processes because each facility may have its own standards and their own operating rhythm. And you're not necessarily taking advantage all the best practices across the organization that could be applied. So this is another reason you want to centralize. The next is limited technology adoption. Generally, you have different systems, different locations, and or you're on different versions. So you're on different versions of an ERP, and there's a lot of manual processes and workarounds, a lot of Excel spreadsheets, burning midnight oil, pulling extracts, and making things happen, if you can relate to that. And then the data is very inconsistent. You don't have a centralized data repository. You don't have a data lake. You don't have enterprise information management centered around all your data sources. So what you have is you're trying to forecast at the top level, and you find that everybody forecasts different at every location, and trying to roll that up becomes a real chore. And then there's cultural resistance because every plant is going to say, I have the best process to do S&OP or to do, run this line. We run it, our line better than they run it another place. There's different limitations, different technologies, which makes it tough to get everybody on the same page. So when you have 20, 30 different facilities, it's a real challenge to get there. So, but again, the benefits of centralization, as we'll see a little bit later, and at the end of our discussion today, you'll see that the companies that are able to centralize create the benefits that the CFO is looking for. With that, I turn it back over to Greg.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. Trying to get my video working, but okay. Oh, that's okay. So Jim gave you kind of a good grounding on the elements of the approach that we take to assist folks moving from stage 2 to 3. We want to share with you a real world case study and more or less show you some real live data in terms of what you've just witnessed relative to some of the techniques that we're advocating. So what are we looking at? This is from a recent healthcare NGO project. It's an overall result of 8 assessments compilation from 8 different individuals in 8 different disciplines throughout an NGO supply chain. So we take it and we take all the assessments, which we'll show you in a moment. We aggregate them up to get more or less a group picture. That's what you see on the left-hand side. You see 2 charts, tier 1 and tier 2. Tier 1 is the outcome, which is normally the black line of the as is answers to the questions. And then what we do is we superimpose the strategic, tactical, and operational chart on top of the as is. So you're seeing 2 charts here. Up on the top, you'll see the best in class process maturity ranking meter. They came in with a 6.2 rating out of 10. Essentially, the best in class segmentation, we look at the calculation, and they came up as an apprentice at 6.2 out of 10. They are an apprentice in our opinion. And what you see is you see 3 numbers essentially in the bubble bubble diagram, you'll see three numbers: strategic, tactical, and operational, blue, red, and green again. And essentially, they came up as an apprentice, which is 6.20. We then take a look at the STO opportunities. We calculate, as you see in the bubble, we calculate the strategic, tactical, and operational strengths. Remember, the lower number that you see, the lower the number, the stronger the tenet in terms of process maturity. So what we found is that their strength was in strategic, but what we looked at for them is where are the opportunities in terms of the best opportunity to improve their supply chain maturity and performance. And what we saw is the opportunity, there was a lot of work across all tenants. You can see that. But the biggest opportunity for immediate improvement to us looked like it could be the tactical side of it, and we moved on from there. So their apprentices within the best-in-class approach, their strength was strategic tenets, but the improvement more or less was geared around tactical and operational tenets. So with that, we did a little deeper dive for you and went into another slide, which depicts the 6 individual results. From assessing, take a look at it. You can see their titles. I told you they were in different disciplines throughout the same supply chain. And so this is a picture image of each individual in each individual discipline assessing the same supply chain. Their tier 1, tier 2 charts. You can see their calculations. All right. And then essentially what you can see, it's obvious to the casual observer, they are not the same. So they are totally not in sync in terms of their perception of supply chain process maturity within their own supply chain. So we do this for every client. And really, the bottom line is on the bottom of the slide. The power of this tool is being able to profile different perspectives on supply chain process maturity, and then helping that company drive improved value from the differences in the opinions. We have a few others for you as well. We'll go through the grounding. What we also did for this client is we benchmarked them. This is a profile of the NGO industry relative to other industries like Jim mentioned. And this is actually for that client. So you can see on the left, Jim described in detail how to read the chart. We superimposed a couple other industry benchmarks from our database. It's a very vast, deep database across all industries. We put in retail, logistics, and healthcare, and then we positioned that NGO in terms of where they are relative to the healthcare industry right on the left. So the NGO industry is under healthcare, and then the NGO organization is highlighted with a red X on the far right. All right. And so you can see where they reside against healthcare and also against other retail and logistics supply chains. So the net here, folks, is this benchmarking approach really gets a lot of executive attention. When we start to profile, here's where you are relative to your NGO competitors, that gets a lot of traction and excitement and a lot of questions. All right. So we do that for the client. In tier 3, we also ask additional questions about their supply chain. We take the 13 tenets and we ask questions like, how important are these 13 tenets to you individually? Then we aggregate them up, and we also ask about their satisfaction or dissatisfaction. How do you feel about the performance of each of those 13 tenets? So, and then we rank them. And then what you see on the left is we more or less give them a top 5, top 3 tenets. Again, we're trying to prioritize what do we work on first, second, or third to help improve their performance. And you can see leadership, supply chain processes, logistics, agility, and demand management came up to the top. So that's another aspect of tier 3. And then the final aspect of an engagement is the action plan. All right. And just to recap on the top left, who is this organization? They are an apprentice based on best-in-class supply chain processes, so they got a lot of work to do. What is their strength relative to strategic, tactical, and operational? Their strength, relatively speaking, are in the strategic tenets. And where do they sit? They're average within their industry benchmark. And then the action plan comes out at the end of the engagement to basically say, what did we say and the tools say in terms of an action plan? Well, pretty obvious. Focus in on tactical and operational issues, both from a supply chain and risk point of view. That's a process statement. Maybe improve the weakest tenets and then leverage the strongest. Again, we're talking about processes. The third one was provide an understanding to all folks in the organization about the organization's risk appetite and tolerance levels. That's leadership. And number 4, perform a supply chain mapping exercise with all who touch the supply chain. That gets into looking and talking about the tenets that we just described: demand management, logistics, agility, and so forth. And then finally, analyze the mapping process, which is really an interesting process to go through. We help them identify bottlenecks, improve their throughput, maybe even possibly redesign some of their nodes within their supply chain, and begin to talk more about risks. And then that is kind of an agility. So the elements that came up all more or less touch these action plans. And the healthcare executive more or less was very comfortable and happy with it. He definitely said that he would recommend the tool to other staff members, perhaps in other divisions as well. So we were very pleased to hear that. So finally, our last section is the profit pathway, turning supply chain maturity into a revenue engine. And I'll turn that over to Jim to finish out our discussion.
Thanks, Greg. You might want to change your camera. May work now, hopefully.
Yeah,
There we
great.
go. Yeah, sorry about that. Had some technical problems. All right, so we're going to go through the benchmarks, the risk priorities here. As you can see on the left-hand side, we benchmark our KPIs on revenue growth and margin. That came from Gartner. And then we look at earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, which measures a company's active profitability and health with Chainalytics. Then we look at return on net assets, which determines how much management is using its assets. And again, we refer to Gartner there. And then our famous cash conversion cycle, which measures how long it takes the company to convert its investments into cash. Cash is king, as we know. And that's from the Hackett Group. So these numbers came in, and again, from moving from stage 2 to 3, these are the benefits that you can get from each of these areas. Top line revenue, 10 to 15%, pretty straightforward. High inventory turns in the peers. What we're talking about here is if you are able to turn faster than your peers, you're going to have more cash, which is going to increase your cash flow and your margin that you're able to get from your inventory. So you will not have that margin tied up, which will, if you're faster, you will be able to deliver faster than your competitors and therefore drive additional revenue and margin into your company. That's a really sweet one when you get it running. From an EBITDA perspective, a cost to serve perspective, advanced forecasting and integrated planning reduce stockouts and more effectively ensure better product availability. You get another 10 to 15% out of that. Our famous customer delivery on time in full, you can get 15 to 25% out of that. Enhanced coordination across all your supply chain improves, of course, the overall customer satisfaction, reducing delays and errors. So that's one dear to my heart that I've seen work really well. Return on net assets, capital management improvement. Again, you get about a 10 to 15% out of this, and that's better integration and visibility across the supply chain leads to more effective capital allocation and utilization, reducing the need for excess working capital and improving return on investment. All of that return on investment, ROI driver. And then cash is king, cash conversion cycles. How fast can you move it through your system? Improved inventory and faster receivables across the supply chain that lead to more efficient cash conversion cycles. That's a big gain out of moving from stage 2 to 3. And then the last one, fewer stockouts than your peers. Basic forecasting tools and siloed improvements reduce those frequent stockouts. So being able to leverage your entire supply chain as a whole versus just focusing on a particular facility will help you increase your performance there quite a bit. So that's a what you can go to your management and say, hey, if you do these things well, this is how it's going to hit the bottom line, that improving your supply chain from stage 2 to 3 can bring you quite a bit of value to the company. With that, we'll move to the final slide on moving stage 2 to 3, and Greg will kick us off on the top here. Greg?
Yeah, you bet. We have on left to right, on the left-hand box, we have supply chain management, some thoughts. We talked about the as-is tool. That's a dialogue starter, folks. We give that for free. We have hundreds and hundreds of companies in the tool database. We've had over 3,000 companies over 10 years utilize the tool. It's a great dialogue starter, all right? And it's free, all right? And when you do that, you can do it individually or with a group like a team. Start with your own team first, like we essentially profiled for you within the team of the NGO company. Leverage your strengths and improve your weaknesses. And then it helps you prioritize the action items in terms of how to do that. Good supply chain management, analysis, and improvement. On the right-hand side, supply chain risk and resiliency. We talked about that under the 3 dimensions. That also starts maybe you want to start a dialogue, and it should start a risk dialogue when you go through the as-is tool. It should. Then we would recommend that, as we said, maybe you want to map a small supply, take a small product line and map it from end to end, from customers through to suppliers. Then start identifying your internal risks that already happened and or external risks that could happen. It's a wow exercise. We do it for free. All we ask is that client pays our way to get there, but it's about a 3 or 4 hour good collaborative session, and it's really an eye-opener. And then maybe you want to explore using a risk alert system. They're out there. We have several in our consortium where they go out and scan the globe every hour and bring in 30,000 to 60,000 risk sources of risk, filter it out for you, and provide an outside-in risk alert profile that might impact your supply chain ecosystem. So supply chain management and supply chain risk and resiliency, 2 out of the 3 dimensions within what we consider a resilient enterprise. Jim?
Thanks, Greg. And then moving on and building on what Greg said, the other dimensions of balanced scorecard and the Gartner maturity model. Of course, in the balanced scorecard, we have the 4 dimensions, but I added one there on suppliers because it is an ecosystem that we have. So from a finance perspective, moving from stage 2 to 3, it's really that cost out perspective of people cost into margin enhancements, and how do you drive that throughout your organization? And again, people are dispensable generally in a siloed organization, where when we move into a centralized organization, we're going to be more valuing our people and making sure they're in the right spot and leveraging their talents across the organization. From an internal processes perspective, we look at from streamlining processes within your silo to creating stability across your silos. And then from a customer perspective, it's doing only the minimum necessary that you need to do. Often in silo environments, that's what you do because you're competing. You do the minimum you can, and instead of finding profitable types of activities to work with your customers to drive that margin growth with the customer. And then the final one is, of course, that we kind of left out in the balance scorecard is suppliers, because very often we subpar the suppliers, meaning we commoditize them, we treat them very competitively. We don't try to build relationships. Often in stage 2, we say we can get at anything that we need from anyone, and then in stage 3, we're looking for that centralized relationship. So those are the balanced scorecard transformations from stage 2 to 3. And then from a Gartner perspective, again, we perform the supply chain management readiness benchmark to understand where you're at, where do you want to go, what is your competitive edge, and then we want to align that strategy to tactical planning, that link between the strategic level and operational level. How do you link all that together, and clearly understanding your total supply chain end to end of plan, source, make, deliver, return? That is supply chain. Very often you go into organizations, make is not part of the supply chain. They have a different reporting structure and it's not integrated. So taking a lot of those best practices on how to create that total ecosystem together is the key to driving maturity and profitable returns. So with that, we'll close out the webinar on our deliverables. Hopefully you enjoyed it and we covered all the topics. Please let us know if you have any questions today or tomorrow. We're always here to help and support you in anything that you're looking to do with you and your company to help drive our overall mantra of improving maturity in your organization and giving you tools to drive acceleration into your organization of supply chain. With that, this is again this is the 3rd webinar, and we'll be coming up to the 4th webinar here on March 27th. If you have any suggestions on future webinars or how we can do the webinars better, please do reach out to us. We love to hear your feedback on how we can make our webinars better for you. And with that, I ask Greg to close it out.
You bet, Jim.
Closing comments?
Yep. We hope we provided a few helpful hints regarding our perspective on the resilient enterprise. Remember, it's a journey, folks. It's not a point solution. Feel free to start the journey by exercising our free online assessment. It's a dialogue starter. It can get you started. Our next webinar, as Jim mentioned, will cover moving from Gartner stage 3 to 4 and how we assist that. And with that, thanks a lot for attending, and I'll see you then.
Thanks, Greg. And thank you all for attending. Appreciate your support. And we look forward to having you on future webinars. And just keep in mind that you have to know where you're at in order to know where you're going. So The assessment's free, it's easy, and please reach out to us if you have any questions. All the best. Thank you.